Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back once again to the second video about the makhraj of al-lisan, the tongue. In the last video we spoke about the furthest part of the lisan, and we spoke about the two letters that come from there, the qaf and the kaf. And in this video we'll talk about the middle part of the tongue. So bismillah, let's start. What we want to get out of this video in terms of learning outcomes is three main points. The first one is to understand the makhraj of the middle of the tongue. The second one is to understand which letters come from the makhraj of the tongue. The third point is to understand which letters from the makhraj of the middle of the tongue touch the top and which don't. And the fourth point is to talk about some common mistakes with these letters that come from the middle of the tongue. So bismillah. So the letters that come from the makhraj of the middle of the tongue are aj, ay, ash. So the jim, the ya, not the maddiya ya, and the sheen. Aj, ay, ash. So what happens with these three letters in terms of the makhraj is the middle of the tongue is moving up towards the middle of the upper palate. So try it with me. Aj, aj. Can you feel the tongue? And with aj, the jim, the middle of the tongue actually touches the middle of the palate. Or the middle of the tongue touches the middle of the top palate. And then ay, the tongue's going up, but it doesn't actually touch the top palate. Same with ash, ash. Try it with me. Ash. The middle of the tongue goes up. That's where the makhraj is from, with the middle of the palate. However, it doesn't touch the palate. Now we'll go to some pictures and describe it in a bit more detail. So here's the three letters that we talked about that come from the middle of the tongue. So you see in the jim, that's the right image, you've got the middle of the tongue right there. With the sheen, the middle of the tongue right there. Yeah, middle of the tongue right there. So with the jim, what happens is that middle of the tongue, you see how it touches the middle of the palate, or the middle of the upper palate. So the makhraj is actually closed. Closed as in the tongue touches the top of the middle of the palate. Aj, it does touch it. With the sheen, you look at the sheen, so the second image there, the middle of the tongue is moving up towards the middle of the upper palate, but there's a little bit of a gap. So it's not closed completely. Yeah, so the image on the very left there, this one here, the same thing, the middle of the tongue moves up towards the middle of the upper palate, but again, it does not close. The makhraj does not close, as in the ya, when you pronounce the ya, just say it, ay, your tongue isn't actually touching the top. So as we said, the three letters, the jim, the sheen, and the ya, not the maddiya, are from the middle of the tongue. And the jim is the only one that touches the top palate, or the middle of the upper palate. The ya and the sheen don't. Why do we go to that detail? We'll find out when we talk about the next point, which is about some common mistakes. And we'll talk about common mistakes with the ya to start off with. Ay, when you say ghayri, or iyaka, that one, or ya, you, yi. So even if there's a haraka, you still don't touch. Ya, yi, you. But let's take the word iyaka. Now, if we close that makhraj, so if we really press the tongue to the top of the palate, what happens is you will cut the sound. You'd say iyaka, and that's not correct. So that's one of the common mistakes with pronouncing the ya, is we shouldn't be closing that makhraj. We should say iyaka. The sound should continue. Iyaka, not iyaka, for example. And let's move to the jim. There's many common errors with the jim, but let's summarize a few of them. With the jim, what did we say? The jim is from the middle of the tongue with the middle of the upper palate. And the tongue actually touches So the makhraj is closed completely. So one of the common mistakes is to say aj. So when you say aj, you're not actually closing the makhraj. The tongue isn't touching the top. Aj. While if you say it correctly, aj, you're closing the makhraj. So one example is the word jami'a, correctly pronounced, jami'a. Incorrectly pronounced, jami'a. You see, ja is incorrect, ja is correct. And another one, or another common mistake, is to pronounce the jim as another letter, like a jami'a, and that's incorrect. That's also an accent thing. So it should be jami'a. There's no ga when it comes to the pronunciation of the jim. All right, so let's summarize and go back to the learning outcomes we wanted to come out from this video with. First one was to understand the makhraj of the middle of the tongue. And we wanted to talk about, the second point, the letters that come from the makhraj of the middle of the tongue. And we said the letters that come from that makhraj are the jim, the sheen, and the ya, the not maddiyah. One thing I actually didn't go into detail is we're saying ya, not maddiyah. If you go back to the videos of lesson 1, we spoke about the ya maddiyah, and we said that the ya maddiyah comes from the, that's the question, the ya maddiyah comes from, we said a, e, u, comes from the jawf, the emptiness of the throat and the mouth. E is different than the ya, not maddiyah. Ya, you, yi is different than e. So the letters that come from the middle of the tongue are the jim, the sheen, and the ya, not maddiyah. And we spoke about the common errors, or some of the common errors, with some of the letters that come from the middle of the tongue. And we spoke about some of the mistakes that come with the jim, in terms of not closing the makhraj, for example, and the ya, by closing the makhraj too much. So that's the letters or the makhraj of the middle of the tongue, and we'll see you in the next video, Insha'Allah, when we talk about some more letters that have to do with the tongue. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.